I think the most interesting thing about Diablo 4 is how different the classes all feel. What I mean by this is there are games that feel like it is just the same thing, but a different coat of paint. Something like The Division 2, how they do their classes, if you want to call them that. It doesn't feel different except for your big weapon and some of the skills you can use or some of the talents you can get from it. But with Diablo 4, it feels like it has the same core mechanics, but every class feels insanely different. Like comparing Sorcerer to Ranged Rogue, they feel completely different. Or Reaper Necromancer to Two-Handed Barbarian. They each play differently enough that I find them very interesting in their own way, and I want to talk about it. Instead of doing like I normally do with my impression videos, where I play a game for 10 hours and give my impressions on them, I decided to put 2 hours into each class and got to the same point, finishing the Court of Knowledge main quest in Act 1 with each of them. This gave me a good feel for each of the classes and their strengths and weaknesses in their early mechanics. For each class, I could reach between levels 10 and 12, which gave me enough spells and points to work with when putting them into my different skills. And I want to break the classes down one by one and focus on their mechanics in this video. I want to start with my favorite class, and the one I play for my hardcore streams that happen on Friday nights, Necromancer. Necromancer's main mechanic is Raised Skeleton. At the most basic level, after you kill an enemy, you can summon a skeletal warrior that will fight with you from their corpse. But when your army is fully summoned, using it on another corpse will buff all of your skeleton warriors for a little while. Necromancer feels like it's a good clearing class with a lot of survivability built into it. I focused more towards the Reaper and Army side of Necromancer skills when I played. And when I played on my hardcore stream, I've done the same thing. Building up Reap and Sever as my two main abilities, and then buffing my Skeleton Warriors whenever I had the chance. Mechanically, I think Necromancer benefits more from its passives than it does getting active skills. You really only need 2, maybe 3 of your active skills, not counting the summoning skills, to really succeed as a Necromancer. Every other point could be put into passives that boost the effects corpses have, or the effectiveness of your warriors, mages, and golems. Unlike something like Rogue, which I think benefits a lot from its different active skills. Speaking of rogues, it's probably my second favorite class to play in Diablo 4. Because it has a quick time to kill and it's focused a lot on mobility, no matter which build you're going for, whether it's the traditional rogue where you shadow step behind someone and stab them in the back and then cut them up with your knives, or a more range-based build where you use your bow or crossbow to keep enemies at a distance while ripping through them with your piercing shots. Mechanically, I think Rogue is made to just keep moving, no matter what. You're not strong enough to brawl like a druid or barbarian, so you have to use your movement to keep yourself alive. It's more of a hit and run or keep stutter stepping backwards to keep the distance while you pick off enemies. Unlike something like the Sorcerer where it kind of feels like you need to plant your feet to get a lot of damage out. The Sorcerer class, it has a lot of active spells in its skill tree, and sometimes it feels like it might be too much because of how few actual action slots you have. I play on mouse and keyboard, and I only have the left and right mouse buttons and the 1 through 4 keys, and it feels like it's not enough for Sorcerers. I know they did this so that they could put Diablo 4 on consoles. Even if you just focus on one element as a Sorcerer, it feels like it's a bit too much for how few usable slots there are. Sorcerer feels like it has very weak defensive capabilities while having really good crowd clearing abilities. Mechanically, it feels like a burst turret to me. It feels like Sorcerers are a heavy firepower class, where something like a Rogue is more movement based in their damage. Sorcerers need to wipe out a group very quickly, or they're going to get overwhelmed fairly easily. Yes, they have defensive spells like Teleport or Frost Nova or Flame Shield, but when those are on cooldown, they could easily get into trouble. If a Sorcerer finds himself surrounded, it doesn't feel like they have a way out like a Barbarian would have. And the Barbarian class feels like it wants to mow through enemies. Like just hordes of enemies just going straight through, like spinning through, just ripping, tearing, and smashing its way through them with an assortment of weapons. It feels like that, but I think it's one of the weaker classes. I was just playing around with a few different skills and trying to find a set that works for me, but I couldn't find a set of skills that I wanted to play with as a barbarian. Mechanically, barbarian is one of those concept classes where it's interesting on paper, but I don't find it all that fun to play. And I know it's a personal thing. It's just, I don't find it all that fun. Having the 3 different types of weapons equipped at once is an interesting concept, but I think it falls short in execution. I just think the class doesn't feel that great to use, in the early game at least. And it mostly comes down to the visual feedback from the game. Unlike the sorcerer or rogue, which have excellent visual feedback on their spells and the rogue's sense of speed with their attacks, the barbarian's attacks don't feel that powerful because they don't have a strong visual feedback presence. Unlike the druid class, which has very strong visual feedback but feels really weak to play. The druid class to me feels like it should be really strong. You can turn into a werebear or a werewolf for God's sake. But when it comes to damage output, early on at least, it's not great. It just feels like it's lacking that punch that you get from a sorcerer's spells or even the tankiness you can get from a barbarian. Visually, Druid is great with its transformations and spells, but I don't think it works all that well mechanically. Mechanically, Druid's main problem is TTK, time to kill. It feels very slow when killing things. I could understand the werebear form being slow to kill and mainly being tank and survivability based, but I put most of my time into using the werewolf form, which felt really slow to kill also. I feel like the werewolf form should be just a bit slower than the rogue's attacks so that it can be a different playstyle from the werebear form and be more agile than it. I put a little bit of time into the other druid classes, but they weren't very interesting to me, and they also felt like they had a slow time to kill. And this is the one class that I died on the Vaynard fight to finish the Cost of Knowledge quest. I think that altogether, Diablo 4 has a really good variety of classes, and they each feel like they're meant for a different playstyle and have a variety of builds that can be made from them because of the freedom of the skill system. And I'm really enjoying Diablo 4, and I might make a video on it based on my time with hardcore streams. If that's something you want to see, let me know in the comments. And just like when I see a pile of barrels in Diablo 4, destroy that like button, subscribe, and have a royal day.